Hey there, I'm Mitch, I'm Choking on Ice, and today I'm going to be drawing fan art based on fan fiction of the Minecraft movie. There will obviously be spoilers for the movie, there'll be some spoilers for the fix, and a lot of me getting wildly off track while I draw incredibly earnest fan art about the most ridiculous movie I've seen in years. This will be goofy but appreciative. Personally, I really enjoyed the movie, even though it was like 45% hot garbage, 45% great jokes undercut by a character going, well, that just happened. And like 10% visual references to 9/11. If you think I'm lame and cringe, you're right, but let's keep that energy to my comment section and leave the writers of these fanfictions alone. Unless you want to read their stories and give them flowers, in which case, go for it. Now, I'm gonna get right into it because frankly, I'm not in the mood to edit a long intro. It seems hard. Fanfic number 1, The Map. Set in the canon of the beginning of the movie, this fanfiction is one of two in a series that I believe is possibly still ongoing, meant to be fixing parts of the original canon. In this case, it's a rewrite of Natalie, Henry, and Dawn's introductions. The character introductions in this movie are insane, honestly. Steve has a 10-minute monologue, and then we watch another like 6 minutes of Garrett's morning routine and a failed storage unit auction. Then we get to Henry and Natalie just in the car arriving to town. A pretty lackluster intro by comparison. Dawn's is even shorter, basically showing up for a minute and then bouncing. A real shame, too, because there are a ton of setups to bits that never got followed through on, and it was such a missed opportunity. Like, on the drive, Natalie says, "It was Mom's dying wish for us to live here." Or at least that's how I interpreted it. That is so funny, and it's insane they just drop it at that. When this movie is at its best an amalgamation of sketches and bits. So the fact that they let gold like an ongoing bit about Natalie and Henry's mom having told them just a ton of insane crap as her quote unquote dying wish is really a shame. Same goes for Dawn's odd jobs. It's clear that a ton of Dawn's screen time got cut, which is a legitimate crime because Danielle Brooks is a phenomenal comedic actor and she could easily go toe to toe with the likes of Jack Black if given the chance. When introduced, Dawn is a real estate agent, moonlighting, I guess, as a mobile petting zoo owner, which feels like a good setup, but we never get the punchline. When we get to the overworld, it would have been so much more fun to watch Dawn, Henry, and Natalie all thrive in their new environment. Nat, I mean, come on, I assume you've seen the movie. Nat suddenly getting really into combat, like hand to hand combat after all the canon events, a little random. So if she got into it during like the adventure, that would be a lot cooler and more fun to watch. Henry getting like obviously really involved with the crafting. I think Dawn as an eccentric survivalist would be really fun. The fact that she has like the mobile petting zoo and she's like really good with the wolves off the bat, you know, just could be cool. Maybe like she used to build houses in the desert out of organic materials, and that's why she's able to make such a cool mushroom house so easily, like and quickly too. She used to take care of sled dogs in the Yukon, so she's not easily intimidated by wolves. She used to have an assistant who taught her some of their native language, and now she can speak villager. Something that Steve can't even do. There's a lot more they could have done, is what I'm saying. Even later on in the overworld, where there's a scene where Nat and Dawn are walking through the woods having a like emotional conversation while they casually take out mobs that charge them, which is a very funny concept, but it feels like instead of taking the joke and pushing it to its absolute limit, the way that comedy is supposed to do, they took really funny ideas and watered them down, or in this case, honestly, sped through them as quickly as possible. The idea of them having a fun, like a very like deep conversation. The conversation was not that deep, but you know, and walking through the woods as they're getting charged by stuff. That sort of thing is kind of meant to slowly ramp up. The ridiculousness lies in it being a longer bit. It has to last a certain amount of time for it to really land. And it just didn't get the chance to, which is such a shame. Like, all it needed was a few extra, like, 30 seconds, a minute, that's it. It didn't need a ton more time, just a bit. All of that. is to say, I appreciate seeing other people making their own corrections to fill in what was lacking in the source material. Unlike me and my rambling, this fic is very focused on the introduction of Natalie and Henry and their first encounter with Dawn, choosing instead to make Dawn an old friend of their mother's whom they'd never met before, but had heard about. This makes a lot of things make way more sense. One being that if their mother wanted them to live somewhere, it would make sense that it's somewhere with some sort of support system for them, since it seems like they kind of have no other family to turn to. And two being that now at least makes an iota of sense that Natalie would call Dawn in an emergency. For real, who would call their realtor for help when their little brother goes missing? Girl, call the police. What are you doing? You live in a town. You live in a society. Call anybody, frankly. But you're as he should. Fanfiction number 2. Except okay, sorry. Really not, I guess. Okay. I know it's only the second drawing, but I'll come clean and say that not all of these are based entirely on fanfiction. Sorry for the clickbait. But before you click away, let me defend myself because I have a good reason. And also, I did do 9 drawings, and only 2 of them are not based on specific fics, so maybe cut me some slack. This one is set during the canon story around the middle-ish of Act 2, I believe. I might be totally wrong on that, though. I don't know how this movie is divided. It feels like a blur. The Elytra scene was obviously a massive part in why the Steve-Garrett ship blew up, be it ironically or earnestly. So I wanted to do something with that scene since it's clearly very influential for the fandom. I'm not 100% sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Elytra scene, quote-unquote, is already its own tag on AO3, so I feel like that also gives me an out. Now, stepping away from fandom for a second, I actually just want to talk about the film itself a little bit. Yes, this movie's bad. It's probably what some people would call a guilty pleasure, but I refuse to feel guilty about my pleasures. So, here's my quick analysis of why something so chaotic and unpolished still manages to be such a satisfying watch. A big part of it actually happened behind the scenes over the course of about a decade. So, some know and some may not, but this development, the development of this script started back in 2014. And no, I don't mean they started spitballing in 2014. I mean that in the year 2014, 2014 is when the first script was fully written. Then, the writing team was let go. Or they left their position on their own, or they all died in an explosion. I don't know. I don't know what happened to them, but what I do know is that they got replaced with a new writing team. And then the script got reworked, it got taken and rewritten in a bunch of spots and edited and all this stuff. And then this team, they were also replaced. Now this third team, they took the script and reworked it again. And then, you're never gonna guess, but they were replaced as well. The final script that actually got put to screen was the one that this fourth writing team had worked on. What's important to understand is that when a new team comes on to rework the script, they don't scrap it and start from scratch. But they're also not just sitting around editing the grammar or declunking the dialogue. No. What happens is a little more complicated. The writers need to add to the script, they can also remove parts, but they have to use the existing framework to at least some extent. That doesn't even touch on all the edits they would get from producers because scripts need every part approved and are constantly given notes on what to change. So by the time it was done, the Minecraft movie was and is essentially 4 different scripts that had been torn apart and Frankenstein together because each team had their own artistic vision. And it's actually super obvious if you're looking for it. I knew this about the movie in advance, so I did actually spend time trying to isolate the different stories and watch for when we skipped from one script fragment to the next. Garrett's character is a great example. He's treated almost like an antagonist by the film's narrative, even though he's never really that evil or frankly that bad of a guy. He's broke, he's down on his luck, and he's about to lose his business and home. He finds out he has the chance to save it all, and he's a bit annoying about it, for sure. But Steve has no attachment to the diamonds that Garrett wants, The portal is not temporary, and Garrett could come back whenever. Steve could have literally just told him, "You don't have to blackmail me, dude. I'll give you a bunch of diamonds. Just wait till we're done with this other thing first, though." That's it. That's all it would take. Just give me like a few days, man. So why is he framed like the bad guy? Outside of him being dumb and definitely a little annoying. It's because in one of the script iterations, he was definitely meant to be more of an actual antagonist. Same goes for Dawn, who has, not as a villain, she has a bunch of setup for her character, like to make her over the top and silly, and then basically given nothing to do the whole movie. The fight that Natalie and Henry have over the misunderstanding lasts all of 30 seconds. Because if you actually look at it, they have this misunderstanding. They get separated. They spend the entire time they're apart worrying about each other, and then make up as soon as they reunite. It's not much of an actual conflict. Then there's Malgosia and her war against creativity, when the movie is absolutely not about that. The Minecraft movie doesn't have an overarching theme about being creative except for Malgosia's ramblings. All these things are from different scripts, and that's why they feel like they exist in a vacuum away from each other. Like, when you're watching this movie and something is shown or mentioned, there is no guarantee that it's ever going to come back or pay off later. Which is why it's so fun. The writers behind these scripts were genuinely talented. At least half of the jokes in it play out like SNL sketches or crazed improv bits, and they're genuinely good. If undercut every once in a while by pacing issues or just a kind of crappy, very millennial humor, like, that just happened type of gag. A ton of the emotional stuff can be really boring because you can tell that it's in there almost out of obligation rather than necessity or even desire. But because the characters are so heightened and ridiculous, even the boring bits make you want to pay attention. Because, what do you mean? We're cutting from an underground fight club where Jason Momoa, of all people, is getting his ass handed to him by a CGI baby, to Henry having a hallucinogen-induced panic attack about his interpersonal relationships. Also, I want to say, Henry exiting that scene by just falling through the floor, landing face down next to Jason Momoa, what the hell's his name? Garrett and Steve, and no one noticing it. I was crying. That was so funny. I just wish the movie top to bottom should have just been that. It would have been so good if they took the Blues Brothers approach, where it's just sketch bit to sketch bit throughout the whole thing. To me, the best bad movie isn't one that's so good, or so bad it's good, but a good movie that shot itself in both feet and then jumped off a cliff. A great example of something else like this is Riverdale on Netflix. It's terrible, but it's also amazing, and I mean that very genuinely. Watching it is almost like gambling. It's garbage, and it sucks to get through. But there are enough hidden gems in the trash that you can't help but watch and search for more. TBH, I'm also putting out feelers right now if anyone would be interested in a similar type of video about Riverdale, because I do technically already have it recorded. I just am lazy about editing. Another example would also be Fast X, aka the 10th Fast and Furious movie, in which Jason Momoa plays my favorite queer-coded my favorite queer-coded villain of all time. Oh my god, just watch it for him. I just watch it for him. He's amazing. It's amazing. It doesn't matter if you don't like Fast and Furious. Also give it a chance. You're gonna like it more than you think. If you like musicals, it's just a musical, but instead of singing, they drive. That's like literally all it is. It's high camp theatrics. And Jason Momoa looks amazing in Pink Silk. Now, circling back to the drawing, I originally wanted to make this a 2-panel comic with widescreen proportions to mimic a screenshot from a movie. One with a close-up on Garrett saying something like, "I gotta admit, it's really beautiful up here." And then a shot of Steve staring at Garrett saying, "Yeah, it really is." I won't lie. I wish I could have done that. But I already drew way too much stuff for this video and made it way longer than I meant to, both in length of production and probably length of this once it's done. So instead, I settled on a full body shot of them flying and Steve looking at him longingly. I tried to capture the general energy, and I think I did a decent job. This kind of scene in a romance movie or book or whatever is always corny, but also, I'll be honest, when it's done well, it'll have me giggling and rolling around on my couch. That's right, I'm a big loser. Get on board, folks. In this case, I thought it would be more silly than anything, I'll be real, but that's also because I'm the one making it and this whole thing is meant to be a little goofy. So, who knows? Maybe soon enough there will be a fanfiction with a scene like this that's genuinely good, and I'll be kicking my feet at that. Until then, though, we'll just have to make do with this drawing. Fanfic number 3. Okay, yes, technically it's the second fanfiction, but I'm just numbering the drawings, so sue me. Set during the canon story, right around the beginning of the third act, this is another fanfiction looking to correct the source material. Specifically, the aftermath of Garrett's sacrifice to save Henry and Steve on the bridge. In the description, they call out how there was basically no reaction to Garrett dying. Yes, we know that he doesn't die. As an audience member, I doubt pretty much anyone thought he was going to actually stay dead. Although, if you did, no worries. I'm not trying to roast people who might have not expected to come back, more so the predictability of this type of movie trope. As a general rule of thumb, though, for those out there, when it comes to media of any kind, most especially in action and adventure genres, no one is ever dead unless you see the body. Specifically, no main or even side character is going to die entirely off-screen with no confirmation, at least not in any minimally decent media. The rule of show don't tell in shows and film is incredibly important and sadly often forgotten lately. Netflix. Percy Jackson. Avatar live action, oh my god. Sorry, I need to dust in here, I guess. But yeah, because of the rule being applied broadly in most digital media, if you don't see the body, then there's a decently high chance they're not actually dead. I mean, even Disney and Pixar characters will get killed on screen to make sure you know it's for real. And this movie is genuinely very violent. Like, very violent, in fact. It was actually kind of startling. I enjoyed it. But it was like, okay, you guys can't say shit, but you can, in fact, do a lot of 9/11 stuff. That was weird. That was weird. Anyway. But that's how we as viewers know in the film the characters are meant to genuinely be gone. Gone. That's how I'm describing death. That's fine. But the characters in the movie are supposed to genuinely believe everything that's happening right now. They're supposed to buy into it. They should believe he's dead. So Steve and Henry, who just narrowly escaped dying in a massive explosion, should be shell-shocked. They should be staggering in disbelief. They nearly lost their lives, and they are, at this point in time, positive that Garrett must have died in the blast. This fanfiction is written in Steve's point of view, as I believe it is also a ship fic to some degree, but also it makes sense that the adult who better understands the consequences of what just happened would be the one reeling the hardest. Steve is bewildered and barely keeping it together. He's numb and disassociating, while Henry is more outwardly distressed. Henry is hyper-aware of what Steve is doing, how he is reacting, which makes a lot of sense because he's a child. He's treated like he's older than he is by Garrett and Steve, but at the end of the day, he's a 12-year-old looking to an adult to gauge how he's supposed to feel. Henry anxiously prods Steve for reassurance, and Steve understands that he needs to put on a brave face because there's nothing else he can do right now. I think it's very well written from the stance of how these sort of events will actually play out in real life. Like Steve taking a while to fully process what's happening and being numb and shocked and all these things. Henry being much more like anxious and very clearly basing his reaction on Steve, looking to Steve for reassurance and protection and safety. All of that is actually just a very natural, it's a very natural way of writing how this worked, and I think it was very well done. Now, in the movie, I'm not saying it needed to come to a screeching halt or do some 180 in its tone. I actually think it would have been really interesting to also see them amp up the nonchalance to the max, so it feels more like an intentional creative decision rather than them just kind of forgetting that the characters are supposed to think he's dead. Either way, they needed to make a decision, but they couldn't because that's basically what this entire movie is. It's a gigantic coalescence of like 7 different writing teams pulling the script together in every different direction, only to have it snap back into place right in the middle. The lack of concise and authoritative decision making when it comes to this film is exactly why this is the way it is. Which, hey, I'm gonna critique it all goddamn day, but I loved it, so what can you do, really? Now, just as a quick side note, because it's going to come back up in the next drawing, and because I've already mentioned it, I don't know, 5 times, this movie did, like, 9/11. Like, sorry, no. They did 9/11, like, 2.5 times. Like, I'll be real, I don't know how to unpack that properly. I'm Canadian, and, okay, technically I did live in the US when that happened, but I lived in Montana and I was like 2, so who cares? But, like, I just can't leave it alone that this bridge scene combined with the potato statue and the tower at the climax, it's just a lot more 9/11 imagery than I expected to get out of the Minecraft movie, is all I'm saying. Anyway, here's the final piece of Henry and Steve being much more distraught, looking at the burning wreckage of the bridge. And on that very happy note, we're going to move on to fanfiction number 4. This one is set in an AU outside of the canon of the movie, but also just like the universe of the movie. This one's kind of an outlier as far as the fanfictions I chose to go with, so it'll be a quicker one. This one is very much a brain rot shitpost from top to bottom, but it made me absolutely cackle, so I had to find some way to include it. There's not really an easy way to sum up everything that happens in this fic, even as short as the actual thing is. So instead, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to list some of the tags and like other notable things in the fic for you guys. Major character death, Herobrine, angst, Omegaverse, satire, September 11 attacks, hashtag never forget. Emphasis on the hashtag not being necessary on AO3, so that's not just never forget, that's hashtag never forget. So, yeah, I'm so sorry so much reference so far has been to 9/11 in the last, like, little... I promise it'll stop after this, but it has to be said because this is set on the 84th floor of one of the World Trade Center towers, where Steve and Garrett both work as... I don't know, honestly. I have no idea what people did there. I'm gonna say stockbrokers, maybe, because I refuse to Google it right now. I've already done way too much research for this goof-ass video. All you really need to know is they are on the 84th floor when the plane hits the tower. They share a heartfelt confession of love, then Garrett falls through the collapsing floor, becomes Herobrine. So, yeah, those are the main, like, plot points, I suppose. Plot, loosely used. And truly, I had no idea how to draw anything from this fic without it being at least a little disrespectful. I do not think this fanfiction is in poor taste at all. It is very obviously not making light of 9/11. But drawing anything that really depicted, like, the fires or collapsing buildings or any of, like, the wreckage, like, it felt dicey for me. So I decided to draw Steve as a Herobrine. Yes, I know Steve is not the one who becomes Herobrine in the fanfiction, but like I said, I was just trying to find an excuse to shout out this fic. It's great. Besides, Herobrine was originally meant to look like Steve in the game. We see a brief glimpse of him as Herobrine during, like, Henry's Enderman-induced drug trip. So I think this counts. Not to mention the fact that angsty fanfics about Steve becoming Herobrine and either everyone or just Garrett trying to save him are bound to get made. At least one at some point will be written. Mark my words. And maybe it'll look a little something like this. Fanfiction number 5, entitled 'Cause I've waited and watered my heart till it grew, you can see how it blossomed for you. For some of you, it might have sounded like I just quoted a line from it, but if you're a fanfiction aficionado like myself, then this sort of title is very familiar to you. I can't speak to the origin of this trend for fan writers. I actually have no idea where it started, or if there even was a single catalyst for it. I personally have no strong feelings about very long titles, one way or the other, really. But I am wondering, does anyone? Like, is there anyone out there who absolutely loves them, or people who hate them? I don't know. Let me know, because I'm just genuinely curious to hear. It's one of those things that I could picture people having really strong feelings about, but I just have yet to ever hear about it. Long title aside, this fic is another short one. Set right at the end of the film, this is a rewrite of Steve's attempt to stay behind in the overworld as everyone else returns to reality. In this version, rather than giving in to the pleading of the others to go back with them, he insists on staying behind. It's all written from Henry's POV, but the focus is on Garrett and Steve, which I think is actually really interesting that it's from his point of view. I think that's a cool, creative choice that the writer made. Henry is internally monologuing about the tragedy of two people in love missing out on their future because they're too afraid to open up and admit their feelings. The writer uses a lot of very flowery prose. Yes, flowery as in fancy, but also literally flowery. They use a lot of floral imagery to set the scene, which is honestly what got me really interested in drawing it. The portal between the real world and the overworld in the movie isn't the most stylized necessarily, but it actually has a really satisfying presentation overall with the little platform it's built onto. I like the color choice. I think they did a good job. I also really like the way they use pixels as the magical blue swirls that they step through. It's a really nice detail for the transition from reality to video game. I do think that it's maybe almost too subtle just because there's not a lot else happening. It's the only little note, but I like that they did it a lot still. All in all, this guide did not take too long. I may have accidentally turned it into a practice for perspective drawing, but it still looks cute to me. It was a very good fanfiction. I'm sorry that this is so short. I just wanted to focus actually on the scenery, setting sort of thing for it. I thought it was very cute, and I didn't have a lot that was just a visual representation versus an actual kind of direct shot of the fanfic, if that makes sense. I sometimes really like when the drawing or fan art of something is of a set piece or landscape. I think that's very nice, and this felt like a good opportunity to do that to me. So here is the lovely flowery portal. I promise there will be more color and flowers and stuff to it later. It's just, here's the sketch. Fanfiction number 6. Bros even at their worst. By the way, I actually can't remember if I said the titles of all of the fanfictions out loud as I went. That's my bad. I will try to pop them on screen in writing if I forgot, and either way, no matter what, I will have them listed in the description of the video. So sorry if I was disorganized in that. I literally can't remember, even though I just said it 5 minutes ago. Anywho, this bad boy is set post-canon in the real world. No fanfiction collection is complete without a classic sick fic. Now look, I'll be real, sick fics aren't usually my go-to, but there are some really good ones out there, and I do understand why people are so fond of them. I really appreciate how this writer also explained and justified this choice as well. In the description, they talk about how Steve's immune system would be a mess because he's basically been living on another planet away from normal humans, and so he would have lost a ton of his tolerance to germs and viruses. Which is totally true. Your immune system isn't just predetermined at birth. It evolves over time based on other factors like your environment, lifestyle, what other ailments you've contracted in your lifetime, and so on. I'm disabled and immunocompromised, so it is just kind of fun for me to see people taking their real-world knowledge of this sort of thing and using it as inspiration for creative projects like this. I think this is one of the longer fanfictions I chose, nearly 600, or not 600, that... Yes, 600 words is very long for me, guys. My attention span is 3 seconds. No. 6,000 words and 3 chapters. Now, that's not very long for a fanfiction in general. But for this, I had been picking mostly very short stories with only 1 chapter, so I did kinda just skim this one. I am sorry. It's not a reflection on the writing at all. It was very well done. I was having to read through like 50 different fanfictions to find ones that would work for this video. For the drawing, I did also keep it like simple and clear, with Steve in bed getting fed soup. Classic sick behavior. Soup time. In this fic, I think they're kind of roommates, and that they get together as a result of Garrett taking care of Steve. It's obviously set in the real world, meaning it's post-canon. I'm not sure if you've noticed yet, but I have been trying to move through these fics in chronological order to the film, so now everything past this point will be post-canon, but I will probably reiterate possibly on every fic still. I did also try to grab things that I could reasonably tie together as being one mega fanfiction. So by the end of this, you're gonna have one big old canvas telling the most convoluted tale imaginable, which is pretty fitting for the theme of this movie as far as I'm concerned. Oh my god, cosmic alignment, truly. Completely by accident, but creative genius as far as I'm concerned. This was also, like, not the longest drawing. To be honest, I think some of these drawings were some of the shortest, quickest sketches I've ever gotten out, which is crazy. I think most of these didn't take that long, and I normally take hours on every piece. So I don't know, if you're struggling with art block, just pick a really silly thing and draw something too serious about it, I guess. Like, not crazy serious, still silly, but you know. I don't know. It's been the cure every time. Anyway, art advice aside, it's been an God. Yeah. With this one, all right. To be honest, since it's a longer, more earnest fan fiction written post-canon, I didn't have a lot to riff on. It's a good idea with a sweet plot. I appreciate they didn't shy away from how gross being sick can be. I think the opening scene being just Steve straight up barfing, great. Kind of funny in like an objective sense, but when reading it, it's just kind of like, yeah, that's what being sick is like. I like that. I appreciate that over the anime, like, you have a fever and you're really dizzy, and, like, that's about it. Like, the vagueness of that is always kind of annoying to me, so I did really like how they did the sick fic. I think they did a good job. But be grateful I didn't draw old man Yaoi vomit. And let's move on to our next fic. Number 7. Yaoi in my Minecraft movie? First off, A+ title, 10 out of 10. This one is set post-canon in the real world as well. Like I just said. I really liked this idea because I do honestly really enjoy the oblivious character has to be told by friends that they are in fact in love trope. At least, when it feels like it makes sense for the character, I like it. And Garrett is the perfect combo of prideful, gay, and dumb to make it work. Plus, it felt right to set at least one of these scenes here. I'm a big fan of, like, a cast of characters having one set hangout spot, and the overworld games, or whatever it's called, I can't remember right now, actually, but the game store, very clearly a great spot for that. Blame the early 2000s shows I grew up on, because those guys made having a designated public space to meet and hang out every week seem like the most fun thing in the world. Actually, I'm realizing now that I did get to do that back in my first year of uni, but then stuff happened in the world, and suddenly group hangs in public spaces got a lot more stressful. Anyway, now I'm normally not one for the found family trope, if I'm being totally honest. I just find that it can often actually rob the character relationships of their nuance rather than add to it. But these stupid freaks are my exception, apparently. Now, I'm not here to yuck anyone's yum or whatever. I'm not God. I do not pass judgment. That's just how I feel about it. that aside, I do think the Minecraft movie is the first found family trope I haven't been needed to be convinced to enjoy. The reason behind that is probably because two of them are literally children, and then it's a trio of unhinged queer adults who are barely capable of helping raise them, or really even get their own shit in order. In my mind, Dawn would go on to become sort of a wacky aunt. Honestly, maybe even just like older cousin, but maybe wacky aunt as time goes on to Nat and Henry. Probably bonding a little easier with Nat given her interests. Garrett, however, probably finds it easier to bond with Henry to some degree, but he definitely has more chaotic older cousin energy and would probably be like the less responsible one of the two of them. Like, if one of them was to attach like a motor to a shopping cart and then try to bomb a hill, it would be Garrett for sure. And then it would just be Henry hooking up the motor because he knows Garrett's gonna wipe out and he thinks it'd be funny. But, you know. Steve has a harder energy for me to read since we don't see much of him in Chugless post Overworld outside of like the concert sequence and post credit scene. The closest read I could get on him is maybe a step cousin, step uncle, or honestly even a really young eccentric grandfather. If that anyone else feel that? I don't know. Well, Natalie is technically a young adult. She's only 18. She hasn't even had the chance to go to college yet. So even though the familial figures I just listed don't sound the most responsible, I think they'd be dependable, and they would be 100% ride or die. Probably die. Frankly, I know that if you plopped these guys into the woods, they would either not come out or it would take them like 30 minutes. But I don't like their odds still. To be honest, Henry seems to have literally no feelings regarding the situation with his mom dying and his sister taking over. Which, look, in the actual canon, it's literally just because they didn't write it in. They forgot. Truly, these two are so unaffected by being orphaned. But in fanon, let's chalk it up to him being a kid who hasn't processed exactly what's been going on. Because that's what fandom is for, right? It's for just pretending stuff is better than it is sometimes. Oh, yeah. Also, I went way too hard on this drawing. I'll be so real. I later have to erase, like, at least 40% of the interior I draw here because otherwise it wouldn't fit on the actual final canvas. I just got really into the scene. I do take projects like this as an opportunity to push myself to do more dynamic poses, backgrounds, different composition styles, and so on. But this was probably a little extra of me. Extraness aside, I'm gonna pat myself on the ass and say this turned out pretty dope. Fanfic number 8. Except not really, once again. This one is much like the Elytra scene, not based on a specific fanfiction. However, this is a post-canon event for a canon ship that I'm pretty sure everyone pretty much universally agrees that this is awesome. This is OTP. This is chemistry, Riz, off the charts. And that's obviously Marlene and Nitwit. The villager is in formal robes. Basically the same as his usual tunic and pants, but the tunic is shorter and a much darker green. Marlene's wedding dress is based off the blouse we see her in at first, which felt like a nod to her character in Legally Blonde, but also is serving C unt. Part of the motive here is that this sort of thing seems like it would be in the background of fanfics, even though the actual fic might not have anything to do with the two of them. It's common for fandoms to sort of silently, nearly, like unanimously, agree on random little things that will pop up to varying degrees in fanfiction, like fan creations. Sometimes it's a full revision of the canon, tags stating that a redacted character survives and goes on to retire on the beach in Jujutsu Kaisen, even though he's never once, like, mentioned or appears in the actual fic. But sometimes it's smaller and more innocuous, like, Aizawa being the adoptive father of Shinso in the My Hero Academia fandom. Now, this hasn't popped up in any of the fanfics I came across, so this is more of a prediction, I guess? And hey, maybe just putting it out there into the universe will make it so. We'll see. I'm manifesting it, baby. All I know is Jenny Cools and Maddie Berry are a match made in heaven by the comedy gods. And I would kill for a Mamma Mia style rom-com, but Coolidge is the bride who has invited a bunch of young women to her wedding and is trying to figure out which one is her and Matt Berry's long-lost daughter before the wedding. Yes, I know. Flawless film concept, and no, I've never seen Mamma Mia. Why do you ask? All in all, this drawing was pretty quick and simple, and since it's not an actual fan fiction reference, it technically wasn't necessary. And definitely the Mamma Mia posters I crudely photoshopped were not necessary, but I did this one just for me. I did 8 for you guys, this one's for me. And here it is. Fanfiction number 9, and it's Yuri time, baby! Last, absolutely not least, entitled, I Guess You Are Afraid of What Everyone Is Made Of. Finally, it's lesbian time. Okay. They don't have to be lesbians exactly. They could identify any number of ways. All I know is that fandom shipping is just short of a drought when it comes to sapphic content. Yes. There are popular WLW ships out there. I know that, and I don't want to overlook them, and blah 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 blah, disclaimer. But come on. I've been in online fandom spaces for literally over a decade now. We can take a step back. We can be real with each other. The vast majority of popular ships are cis, mostly white or white passing, skinny gay men. So any dip into more queer diversity is always nice to see, which is why I'm also excited that old man Yaoi is getting more popular. I would love to see more non-toxic Yuri. I'll be so real. I don't know why toxic Yuri has to be the thing that's trending. Personally, I would love to see women in healthy relationships, but that's just me. Anyway, with all that said, I love this ship. I think it would be so dang cute. I need to be honest, this ship is legitimately the sole reason I would want to see a sequel movie. Is it mostly personal headcanon and fandom brain rot fueling my love for them? Yeah, maybe. But that's 90% of what shipping is anyway, so who cares? This one is a shorter fic about the potential for a romance between Dawn and Alex. Now you might be thinking, Alex? She wasn't even in the movie. To which I would say, so? Literally, when has that ever stopped shippers before? And then I would follow up with telling you that actually Alex has a cameo in the post-credit scene in which we see that she's moved into Steve's old house. And then I would tell you that this faceless cameo is performed by none other than Kate McKinnon, the ghost-busting box muncher extraordinaire herself. No, but for real, I love her, and I would love to see her as Alex. Since we only get that little post-credit snippet, we don't have much or anything to go off of for her character, except that she had a green shirt on. But in my mind's eye, I picture an eclectic butch who actually shares a handful of similarities to Dawn. I could see Alex being a non-binary butch lesbian, but that's my own biases shining through. I love me a butch. I love me an NB butch. Yes, bring it on. I think they'd probably work a rather strange job, or more likely, a large number of very normal jobs that seem out of character for them. They'd be someone who's a little overly familiar with people off the jump, who's with a casual charm to her, someone who's very confident, doesn't look to others for validation, something that would probably rub Steve and Garrett the wrong way at first, because, yeah, let's be real, Steve also has an ego to him in the way that Garrett does, and wanted to impress the others a little bit. Let's be so honest with ourselves. Steve would be a little pouty the same way Garrett was if Steve wasn't the one kind of winning the situation the whole time. Is my personal theory. If you disagree, that's fine. But I don't think Steve is as soft boy vibes as everyone else kind of moves to. I think he's also a boy failure, okay? I think he's also like a flop era gay dweeb. Like, let's let him have it. But Alex would become endeared to Natalie in a way that Nat is definitely lacking, I think, at the moment. Not to replace as a mother figure necessarily, but as someone Nat can look up to that's very openly proud of all of her accomplishments and gives her the space to be a child. Because as wacky as the others are, she kind of doesn't have that opportunity. They're a little too almost even on even playing fields with her, if not less put together. Dawn and Natalie have a very sweet relationship. It feels more like the relationship you have with a much older friend rather than the mentor type of role that Alex could fill. I can really see Alex teaching Henry stuff like carpentry, and beekeeping, and like random stuff like that too, which would be very entertaining. As Dawn and Alex grow closer, I think that's when Dawn would start feeling more confident as a pseudo parental figure for Nat and Henry. Maybe not, again, full parent, but definitely more like aunt or like more responsible, like older mentor, whatever she needs, just a guiding hand and someone that she could rely on. As for wardrobe, they would definitely be rocking a vest pretty much all the time, but in a way that somehow always works. On a cold day, warm corduroy button up shirt and a nice wool vest and overcoat? Yes. On a hot day, a light linen vest with no shirt and a pair of pleated shorts of like a matching fabric. I know I'm rambling about clothes right now, but I promise I am going somewhere. Dawn leads towards like gaudy, in a good way, like not gaudy actually, loud 80s styles and silhouettes, which work so well on her. I love them. But her style isn't actually that much of a focal point. I mean, she barely stands out when she's standing next to Garrett in his hot pink leather fringe. So Alex dressing more vintage wouldn't look terribly out of place. But more importantly, Alex dressing in somewhat 50s inspired fits would complement Dawn's because in the 80s, the 20-year fashion cycle, oh god, in the 80s, the 20-year fashion cycle had brought back 50s styles. So we actually base a lot of our understanding on 50s styles on the 80s revival of the 50s. That's where most of our idea and most 50s iconography we're aware of actually comes from. It would look a lot different if we based 50s wear on actual 50s wear. Alex's color palette would obviously lean into greens, probably some browns, but definitely a good amount of green. Which is perfect because from the movie we can see that Dawn has two colors she wears the most: purple and orange. Two colors that are tied perfectly together with green. They make a perfect triad, which makes them a perfectly matching set despite their differences. There's more I could rant and rave about how these two could fit together really well, how they could riff off of each other, all of the like interesting kind of dynamics I could picture for them, because that's what I love to do. I love to just absolutely invent lore for characters. I love character building. It is one of like my deep passions. But this video is probably long enough as it is, so I will wrap it here. After all that, here's the final piece. Inked, colored, shaded, and okay, maybe not like fully rendered, but that's because I wanted to get this video posted before June. Absolutely gonna toot my own horn and say this turned out dope. I'm so happy with this final piece. This turned out really cool. The colors worked out really well by the end. I was struggling for a hot sec, so yes, so happy. I'm also so sorry for how late I was uploading this. I'm still really new to this and wildly underestimated how long it would take. But regardless, I really hope this finds people who are equally into over-the-top good, bad movies, fanfiction, fan art, and whatever brand of funny I seem to think I am. If you watched all this, congratulations, your attention span is probably way better than mine, and also thanks a ton. It genuinely means a lot to me. If you enjoyed this, hit the buttons that let me know. If you have any thoughts about the drawings, the fanfics, whatever nonsense I talked about this whole time, I think I blacked out, please drop it in the comments. I really would love to hear from people just because this is a thing I'm passionate about, and I would love to hear about people who are also passionate about these things, because I think that's kind of where the beauty of fandom comes from. For real, if even just one person likes this video or comments, I'm probably gonna like piss my pants and start howling at the moon. So one like equals one pair of pants I'll have to replace, I guess. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Bye!